My name is Marcia Robinson, and we are gathered here to have a telling of Sweet MUMories as part of the 50th anniversary of the Miami University Middletown campus. These oral histories are being conducted at the Gardner Harvey Library on today, September 13th, 2016. Do we have your consent and permission to begin this recording?
Yes.
Thank you.
I've been thinking a lot about the library, getting ready for tonight, and the thing that keeps coming back to me is how 43 years ago, when I started here as public services librarian, how print-oriented it was and how it is not now. And not that that's a bad thing, and that it was a good thing then. It's so very different. We had a lot of books. Our goal in 1973, when I came, was to get to 50,000 books. And we reached that goal in, I think, about 1978. We also were a partial depository for federal government publications, which was a big part of our outreach to the local community. Armco Research had a research library, and they were very heavy users and supporters of the federal government documents depository. Our student assistants spent hours helping us file those and keep track of them. Because we were subject to inspection that was a congressionally designated service that we were providing. So we were subjected to occasional inspections from the superintendent of documents, who would come and make sure that things were in order, and when we had to get rid of them, we had to ask their permission and so forth. So we were very print oriented. I was just reading something this afternoon that said that we subscribed to 555 periodicals. And I don't know how many are on that shelf right inside the front door, but I don't think there are 555.
More like 30, yes.
But now you have access to how many?
Right, just many, like 30,000 and more, right?
There you go,
Right,
there you go.
yeah.
So, it's not that 555, that was a lot, but with the electronic access, think of how much more you can provide now than we could provide then. So, and of course, the catalog was paper-based. Remember the 3x5 cards?
Oh, the McBee cards.
There was times where I had to file, I think, every one of those government documents in the summertime. And I remember one day we had to make sure they were all in numerical order because they had to come and check. It was sometime in the summertime. And I was like, oh my gosh, you've learned? All right, okay, 610.425 and 610.456, and you had to make sure they were in order and your eyes were crossing.
And you also learned a lot about the federal government.
Oh, yes, you did.
Because they were organized by government department. So you learned about that there was the Department of State and Department of Education. Maybe it was before the Department of Education, I don't know. So you learned the organization of the federal government in order to be able to do that.
And they were like tissue papers, and so it's flimsy and tissue paper-like materials, and you got paper cuts, and your fingers were black after a while. But that was all part of the filing system, and it was very interesting because then you got to understand what that was all about, and you learned behind the scenes while you were working. You know?
And some were this big, and some were this big, and some were rolled up as posters.
Right. You had to make sure they were filed correctly, and they had to be archived, and they had to be saved because they're going to be used again. You know, these were very important papers, very, very important papers, very important. But yes, with all of those books, I could not wait till the brand new books came in. You know, and we had to get the jackets on them, and I couldn't wait because I wanted to read the jackets and then get to file them and smell the new books, you know, that new book smell, you know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
right? The new book smile. And then the new magazines come out, and you get to read the new magazines, what's out new. Now you had to put them up on, they were gone. And then you had to put them right back on there because they were fast and furious to put them back on the shelf.
And there was a lot of autonomy here. We did all of our book ordering. We did all of our own acquisitions. We did all of our processing, all of our prep. In fact, I was reading in some old annual reports that of the other regional campuses across the state, a lot of them relied on the behind-the-scenes processing and ordering and that sort of thing from their parent institutions. But Middletown and Hamilton were pretty independent in terms of those behind-the-scenes things.
Yeah, that's definitely continued. I mean, that's been something in the time that I've worked here as well, that we've been kind of free to meet our own local needs and, take requests and do things the way we wanted to do them in many ways, and though cooperating in the larger system. But that's been a nice ability, to have that freedom.
We even produced our own cards to go into the card catalog. The way it was being done when I first started here was one of our full-time staff members would take a Polaroid camera and remember the big books that had the
Microfiche,
the
wasn't it?
no, the printed copies of the Library of Congress catalog cards. And she would actually, she had a little stand for
Yeah, she did.
the Polaroid camera, and she'd take a picture of the Library of Congress card, and then our staff members would modify them. But we had to have multiple copies, because you had to have an author card and a title card and several subject cards and a shelf list card. Do you remember what a shelf list is? And so in order to get those multiple copies of the cards, our photocopier was downstairs in the periodicals room, and she would usually go on Friday afternoon, because that's when it wasn't so busy. And she would use the photocopier with cardstock that was perforated for 3x5 and photocopy all of those. Well, occasionally the photocopier would catch on fire because that cardstock was just a little too much for the photocopier to handle. So it was a big deal for us when we went into OCLC and we were able to order our cards and we didn't have to make them here.
But then I had to file those cards. Card after card after card.
And you put little flags in the catalog.
Oh, yes. Oh, and
Yes.
don't you remember the little flags on the shelf for the books?
Yeah,
Because you
right.
guys had to check us.
Right.
Make sure that we put them in the right spot.
Because that's what we did one time. During Christmas break, we would read the shelves. And you had to put, if there was missing books or they're not in order, you had to add, put a flag there.
Yep.
And we read every shelf.
Well, you had to read the shelves so we could get ready to do inventory, which was when we took the shelf list, which was a separate card catalog where the cards were filed according to the way they were sitting on the shelves, the books were sitting on the shelves. And we'd have two people, and one person would be reading the books on the shelves, and the other person would be reading the cards in this shelf list catalog. And if they didn't match, then there was a book missing, or there was an extra book, or there was a book out of place. But they probably weren't out of place because the students had done such a good job straightening it up right ahead of us.
Well, I think I touched every one of those books here in the library.
Several times.
Twice.
Several
No, I think
times.
Twice. 6, 1, 4, 4. Yes. Got very good at those numbers, didn't we?
Oh, boy.
Very good at those numbers and the cards. Very good. And you always knew which books were missing, certain books. Which one missing. We found them.
Right.
And I hated the idea, Virginia, when we had to discard some of them. We had to pull them off the shelf and discard.
Right.
And that just broke my heart, because I probably had spent a lot of time putting them on the shelf. So if you're going to discard the book, what do you think you're going to do to me, right? But it's, because books are, I think, books are here to stay, but we had to discard some books. That was just not right.
Well, see, you enjoyed the upstairs, of course. I enjoyed the downstairs because that's where you had all the magazines and the microfiche and just like a Xerox machine. And I always enjoyed having to help, it was fun helping all the people. You got to meet a lot of people because sometimes you learn their names, especially the nurses. They use this library like a sanctuary. I mean, they came in and took stacks and stacks of magazines. Then it was fun to put them all back in order too.
Especially the American Nursing magazines.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and that was, yeah, they would use that. Oh, they would spread everything out on the table. They had the whole table spread out, and if they got up and left, they would tell us, so they wouldn't take our stuff and lose the
Right,
materials.
right.
Gosh, they would kill us. They would get rid of us.
And they also did a lot of Xeroxing.
Yes,
A lot of
a
Xeroxing.
lot of Xeroxing. Burn that machine up.
The periodicals room was where the computer center is now. And the other distinction it had was it was one of 2 locations in the library where smoking was allowed.
I remember cleaning out those ashtrays.
The other locations were the restrooms.
Yes.
I think under the steps too.
Right.
Yes.
And do you remember what that area under the steps was called, John?
I don't.
I didn't either until I read one of our old handbooks. It was called the Oasis.
Yes.
Oh, under the stairs. Under the
Stairs,
steps.
vending machines,
There was a big table,
copier.
and there were vending machines,
Oh, okay.
soft drinks, coffee, and there's one attorney, I don't know if he's still practicing in town, but he studied in that area for his bar exam.
Oh,
He had been off somewhere to law school, but came back to town and was gonna take the bar here, and he spent hours down there studying for the bar, and the lighting was terrible. I mean, I don't know how he kept his eyesight.
But there was a lot of windows down there.
In the periodicals room.
Oh, yeah.
yes, sir.
You were exposed to a lot of things down there because you could see everything. You could see nature. You know, we had
The squirrels.
the squirrels, the rabbits. Then we had an Easter bunny. Well, that was our streaker. I had a
Yes.
streaker come by.
Streaker.
Yes, you want me to elaborate? Yeah, it was my night to work downstairs in Periodic. And it was a Thursday evening right before Good Friday. I was just sitting, because it was quiet. I'd already filed everything. You know, it's like, okay, what am I gonna do? We just sort of sit down and you read a magazine, you know. And so they run by, they knocked on the window, and he hopped away with his little cottontail. And I was like, what? And somebody, so I saw it, and they said, oh, so here's the Easter bunny. I wonder if he left you any eggs. But no, he didn't leave any eggs, but we just let him go. We didn't need to tell security. We just let that happen. It was just fun. A lot of people saw it, not a
So
lot,
nice.
but some saw it. And it was fun. It was interesting. So, but, you know, again, had lots of fun, lots of activities going on, and magazines, and it was a lot of good sociable time downstairs and upstairs. Yeah, still had to be quiet.
Yeah, we had to be quiet, but we did get to meet a lot of people, and that's where you made a lot of friendships and things like that.
You get to learn about the other, what they're going into, what field they're working in, what they're doing and what's going on. And we always knew, that was our way to tell, all right, there's going to be some kind of gathering here. We're all going to talk about, what was that one we were having, like a teacher meeting. We were having a teacher meeting, or there was a basketball get together, and we're meeting down at the, I'm trying to remember the name, I went down at the basketball area, and we met up at the top area where they have the pool tables and the foosball. We all met there at a certain time and got to meet new people down there. Did you get to do that?
Remember, I was here from 1970 to 1974. We didn't have a lot of those things yet.
Oh, well, we did.
When were you here?
Huh?
When were you here?
I was 76 through 80, and we had we had pool tournaments, we had ping pong tournaments, we had foosball tournaments, we had euchre tournaments.
But those weren't in the library.
No. But that led from the library, because they're all saying, you know, 4 o'clock, and it's like, oh, I gotta work until 6, sorry, you know. But you knew what was going on, that's the way they communicated. And we had the radio station, the MUM radio station, and I got to listen to that, and Servomation, but now it's changed. But here at the library was a place that I enjoyed working. It was a worthwhile job, and I enjoyed it. I got to meet a lot of new people, and a lot of people I became friends with over the years.
Yes, many of the people that came to this library ended up being school teachers with me at Carlisle. So it was like reliving remember those days and things like that. It was just really nice times.
We had a lot of practicing teachers who came in as community borrowers to use the Instructional Materials Center, which was in the room that's right next door to where we are now. And that was not predominantly books. That was other kinds of things that teachers would use in the classroom, like audiovisual materials, film strips, cassettes.
Didn't they even have a
Re-
laminating machine and?
I think so, yes.
There was a laminator.
Yeah, it
Yes,
was a
because I
laminate.
remember laminating a lot of pictures.
My sister's a little younger than I am, and so that she wanted to come with me to the library because I told her there was a teacher room. And so I was working on my teaching degree, so I took her back there and she found her some teacher books with teacher answers.
With a textbook
She was
collection.
in 4th grade, so she would take these books and set them on her music stand, and she would play teacher in her bedroom. And so she just thought that was the best thing here at the library. So we would bring her books back, make sure we brought them back on the correct date so they're not overdue, and then we'd check out some more. So that was while I was doing my student teaching. She really thought that was the best thing ever. Teacher answers, teacher editions, you know, the inside scoop behind the scenes.
I was one of those community members who came here to use the Instructional Materials Center. At least that was one of the reasons I came here. The second reason was there was this cute little librarian that I met at the front desk. And, you know, we get together occasionally, and we've now been married 35 years.
And
So
she's sitting in the front row.
Like Tim said, it was a good place to meet people.
Yes, it was.
Does that count as a Miami merger?
Almost, but I don't,
Except-
I don't have Miami degrees.
She's a Wolverine.
I'm
so-
from that other M school in Michigan.
But I remember when she came, she followed right in behind Virginia Brown. And this lady was very stoic,
She hired me.
very.
Me too.
She had this large personification about her. She was very, to me, I thought, wow, gosh, I hope I turn out to be like that when I become her age. And then here comes this smaller, to
Other
me,
Virginia.
and meek looking to me. No, I like her. She was very powerful when I got to know her. Had the big glasses, and I thought, is she gonna be able to fill her footsteps? She did. She did very well.
Well, when I started here in '73, and Tim was a student assistant,
Yes.
it didn't hit me until the first of these videotaping sessions a couple of months ago that I was not much older than the students. Because I came here right out of my master's degree, and I wasn't 23 yet. Almost, but not quite. So I wasn't much older than the students, but I had come from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I remember one night, the evenings were great. The evenings were more fun, and I worked 2 nights. I worked Tuesday and Thursday evenings for, it seemed like forever. And one night, the student assistant who was working downstairs, might have been Tim, might have been Cheryl. I don't think it was Cheryl, because I think it was earlier, it was before '76. Might have been Tim. The students came running upstairs, and they called me Miss Ellis. They said, we think somebody's smoking pot in the periodicals. And so they had put their heads together, and they said, well, go ask Miss Ellis. She just came from Ann Arbor. She knows. So all I could say was, if it smells like burned pancakes, you probably got it.
We had worked one night, I had a work night, and I'm trying to remember what her, who was it? Who was the older lady?
Charlotte Noble.
Mary Gerber.
Charlotte? No,
Charlotte
Where did she work? What area?
she worked up here, and she worked the late
Okay.
night. And it was
Mary Gerber.
it was the Bengals night. They were playing the Super Bowl, and so she says, Cheryl, we gotta watch this video. She had that deep voice, you know. And
Oh, now that sounds like Mildred.
yeah, it's Mildred. Mildred Essig.
This is Mildred Essig.
Mildred Essig. She goes, we gotta watch this football game. I said, how are we gonna do this? She goes, I'm gonna turn the radio on, all right? And we're gonna go back there in the back and we'll listen to it, okay? But you keep watching the front desk, all right?
We didn't have a television in this building, and I remember one afternoon, all of our student assistants couldn't be found. Well, there was a television over in Johnston Hall in the student something or other. And it was the day of Luke and Laura's wedding on whatever soap they were on. And so all the students were watching Luke and Laura's wedding.
And there was a time where we almost got stuck in here with a snowstorm one evening because it was one of those Thursday nights. And it's like, okay, how are we gonna get out of here? We're at the bottom of the hill. How are we gonna get out of here? And they didn't really have anybody to be shoveling the snow yet or the sidewalks. And then you gotta walk down to, it's still the same parking lot distance that it has been. It hasn't
Yes,
changed.
it's the same one.
Yeah, and you would walk down there and the snow is up around your ankles and how are we gonna get out of there? I thought we was gonna have to spend the night at the library, but we didn't have a bed stuck away anywhere, did we?
We had one in 72 just like that, and I can remember when I was going home, I lived near Red Lion, and when I was going home, there was not even a car on the road hardly, and I was just going real slow. And I forget who it was, I think it was maybe Miss Loeb, Marilyn Loeb at that time, who I called her, she gave me her number and said, you call me when you get home. That's what they did. They did care about us.
Yeah, they
they
did.
loved us. We were their children.
We had one student worker who didn't have transportation, and we wanted him so badly that Mary Gerber, the other librarian at the time, and I agreed that if he was working with us on our night to work, we would drive him home. And we did that for several semesters, I think. On a more serious note, something that happened one evening was an evening in April 1974. I have to back up a little bit. We had students coming in to take classes from Lebanon Correctional Institution. They would come in on a big blue bus and they'd take classes. And a lot of them like to come here to the library between their classes. And this evening in 1974, our security guard, it was either Joe or John Carberry, John Carmody, came through looking for any of the LCI guys who were in the building because there had been a bad tornado in Xenia, Ohio, and they needed these guys from Lebanon Correctional Institution to go out to Xenia, as the security guard put it, to look for bodies.
Yes.
You were probably here that night, too.
They did, and we worried about the people that worked here too. Mrs. Gerber, she had fallen and broken both of her wrists.
Oh, that's right.
And you remember she come to the library to work? How you gonna work, Mary? Well, I don't know. Well, I'm glad you're here, Mary. Would you like me to help? Yeah, I got an itch back here. Can you get it? So I have to get the itch for her. But she did, you remember? She had fallen and she had broken both wrists.
She and Mildred went out to lunch, and it was the end of winter, and the ice had melted and had refrozen, and she slipped in a puddle at a restaurant I won't name, and down she went, and she broke both arms, and of course filed a grievance or lawsuit or whatever. And I remember when some investigator came to question me about Mary's work and what was required of her work and how much did she have to lift. So we really made it sound like, she was totally incapacitated, which really she was. I mean, if you break both arms, it's one or the other, but she broke both of them.
But we always had fun. We celebrated birthdays and we got little cupcakes for everybody. I remember doing that and just making sure everybody was okay. It's like a big old family, it was a big library family.
It was a family, and I can remember one time, I was sick, and I came to work, and I think it was Miss Logue said, "What are you doing here? You look horrible, Tim Carberry." And she said, "Get home." I said, I'm supposed to work? She goes, "You're not going to work tonight. You're going home." And they care. Like I said, they really did care about us.
Well, I think actually, there's a couple of different stories I was thinking of, but I'm going to go with the one that I really remember about my start here on the campus, and it's really kind of a Joe Phillips story. Joe Phillips was the library director then, and he was the most welcoming person in so many ways. I remember interviewing and thinking, like, is this really an interview? It's just, he was just so, talkative and conversational and everything. And I remember him taking me on this tour around campus, like on my first or second day. And we stopped at every department on campus and talked to like every person he could find, and he would just wander into the back of different areas and like, hey, you've got to meet John Burke, and this was such a nice introduction to me, and I met a lot of people that I then remembered and was able to interact with over time in various offices and all. But the thing I really remember about that was just a funny sort of side story. Joe was always talking and telling me things about people on campus, and he had mentioned that Al Cady, one of our zoology professors, was quite the spider expert, and he's encountered all kinds of spiders, and he's got all these spiders around and all this, and I am really afraid of spiders. And we took a turn on this tour, and he said, well, I think we'll find Al back here somewhere. And I just thought, oh, there's this horrible spider collection somewhere where he's going to lead me into and everything. And we never did find Al, but he just kept opening like door after door, and my heart just kept going, like, oh, not there. But it was just such a fun experience, and again really showed his heart and really the real love he had for the staff, for the students he interacted with.
Well, it wasn't spiders, but when I came for my interview, I was being interviewed by Virginia Brown, and she showed me around the library and maybe around the campus a little bit, and she said to me, now for the acid test. And I thought, now what? It was coffee break with the library staff. And coffee break was a big deal. At 10 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the full-time staff gathered around the table in the workroom. I don't know if it's still there. And all I remember about that coffee break was one of the staff members, the secretary, looked at me and said, can you bake cookies? So that was my clue that, the first day I came to work when I finally got the job, I better come with cookies.
And they were good cookies too, they were. So there was always food back there. You guys always had food back there and coffee, and they took their breaks, and we knew that we had to work while they were having their coffee break, and we were working because they needed that time there for them, and we made sure they got their coffee break at 10 and at 3.
I started as a student in the library program that was offered. I already had a bachelor's degree from Purdue, but I did not want to go wherever you had to go for a master's degree, and they offered this, and it was about the time I was going to have an empty nest. So I decided it was a good thing to do, and from there I got my job here. My son actually saw it posted and told me about it, and Virginia nicely hired me. So
We had just moved the periodicals upstairs.
right.
Not too long before you started. And
All the back issues or something were still downstairs, but yeah. And I worked part-time for the first year, and then I became full-time, so.
And one time Belinda came to my office and asked if she could adjust her schedule some so that she could take a calligraphy class at the Middletown Fine Arts Center. And so we agreed that yes, she could flex her hours so she could take that class on the condition that anytime we wanted something, a sign hand-lettered. So for years, the call number labels on the ends of the shelves were Belinda's calligraphy.
Right, I remember labeling all the periodicals.
Right, right.
So.
I think that LTA program is a very important part of the history of this library. Like many people, my mother went through that program. She was probably in her 50s by then. And her kids were raised, and 2 of us were out of college, and the 3rd one was in college. And she wanted to do something, so she came back here and got an associate degree at 50 or 55, and worked as a school library aide until she finally retired in her 60s. So I think that was a real service that the library and the university provided to returning adults in the Middletown area.
There were a lot of changes that happened during my 31 years working here. We had the card catalog, and you had to go and look in books to find answers to things, or to find an article. You went to the Reader's Guide and found out where it would be. And we did some interlibrary loan, but you had to fill in a form and mail it somewhere. And hopefully somebody would send it back. And then later everything became online, and it was easy to see who had the periodical that you wanted the article from and request it, or request the books and things.
Do you remember the microfiche we had to do?
Oh, yes, I remember the microfiche.
And spin
And
them
then
up.
also the microfilm when trying to find where the article was.
We had I took a couple classes here. It was Fortran and COBOL. Yeah, that's like, do you understand the language of computers here? Fortran and COBOL. Well, then we had a reader downstairs when you put it on cards. So people made sure that their cards were in the right order. If not, if you dropped them, you were all out of order, and then you lost your program. So I put all my cards in, and it runs off this green, light green, dark green paper. Do you remember that downstairs right by the periodic? Would run through, and if you didn't do it right, you got in a big loop, and you had all this green paper that just kept right on rolling. So, but again, I'm glad that technology's changed, because I don't think I could do cards for the rest of my life. But now it's a lot easier to find things and create programs than it was be 1010 Yes.
Well, I've always contended that the library profession was really one among the first fields that recognized the potential for technology. And here in Ohio, of course, we had OCLC that was really groundbreaking when it came to harnessing computer technology to help us do our jobs. I talked earlier about when we went into OCLC and they provided those cards for the catalog. And as Belinda said, students would come and say, you don't have a book I need. Do you think they have it in Oxford? Well, before we had OCLC and then the computers as we know them now, we could just guess. We'd fill out a form, send it to Oxford, and hope that they had it. We didn't have any way to look up ahead of time to know if they had a book or not. So
Speaking of computers, my husband worked at Arco, and when they stripped it to computers, they used that little room off the back porch with a computer and came in and learned how to use the computers there.
right.
Okay.
The only problem being they had given them a phone number to call if they had problems, and it was some poor little lady in Cincinnati that had to go home and call.
Yeah, from early days, it was assumed that this building was the place for the computer center to go. And so when they put in the mechanism that Cheryl was talking about, and if the programs weren't running fast enough, it was time to close the library.
Yep.
But the computer programs weren't finished running, so it became a little bit of tension until they finally worked out a way to move the library operations upstairs, give the lower level to the computer center, and then finally find a way to cordon off that downstairs area so it could be independent of library hours, and they could come and go, and we.
I predate all of that, I guess. Because when I was a systems analysis student here and working in the library, we would punch cards, key punch cards, send them overnight to Oxford, do the in-office mail, and hope they would come back within a day or two so that we could review our programs and make modifications to send them back to Oxford. And that was the best we could do. And working in the library gave me an advantage that I had access to the in-office mail and could work late in the evening and get things done, maybe more so than some of the other students. But it was quite a change to go from key punch to when I was a student over in Oxford to actually be able to hand my cards in and get them back within an hour.
Related to John's story here, and also to what Virginia said about libraries being one of the first and early places where technology might be applied. The library at the Hamilton campus opened 2 years later than the Middletown campus, and the library had an automated checkout system. That when the library opened in 1968, the automated computer system, a checkout system, circulation system was a key punch system. So we did what John was talking about. All of our circulation happened via a key punch system. There was a book card in each item in the library, and a system to support that. But then what we needed to do too is send all of the day's work to the Oxford campus, where the actual processing happened, the data processing happened.
I remember when computers first came on campus, Dr. Bennett did not see that the library needed one.
Right.
We could always carry our little disk over to the Johnson Hall and do whatever we needed to, and thinking, gosh, how things have changed.
We didn't, Miami University Libraries in Oxford were part of OCLC long before the regional campuses. And Dr. Bennett was in Columbus for something, and he visited the Ohio State University Library, and somebody showed him how they could use this computer terminal to look up his doctoral dissertation and see the record for his doctoral dissertation on the computer screen as if you were looking it up in the card catalog. And that was what really turned the tide, and then all of a sudden he saw that maybe, yes, he would support the financial commitment that it took for us to go into OCLC, and that happened in the late 70s, 78, 79.
You were here.
So one of my favorite jobs in the library was working in the reference section. And I was wondering, when did we get rid of Encyclopedia Britannica and World Book and all the reference materials that were in a good section of this area that we're in now? And I mean, we didn't have personal computers or networks or anything back then.
Right, I mean, that's,
When did it change over?
yeah, it's an interesting question, because, when I came here in 2002, there was a beautiful reference collection here, and I had made it a point in my previous job and then in this one to take time to get to know the reference section, because I'm going to need to use that. I'm going to be, in there with people all the time, and we're going to be, needing to track down a particular, both titles I knew and titles I didn't know, subjects I knew, subjects I didn't know. And so I spent about, a week or so, parts of that whole week, just kind of wandering through and taking notes, and things. And really, that's how it functioned. I would say for the first few years that I worked here, we did have a lot of interaction with that. We did not have very many, full text reference sources online or anything like that. We had nothing else to go to. And so that really was part of the working operation of things. But then little by little, we started to add online encyclopedias or online handbooks and reference books. And soon it got to the point where we were going through the collection, the librarians would go through the collection and start to note down, like, oh, well, we have that one online, and oh, we have that one online, and oh, we have a newer one online than that one. And it got to be that situation where we were wondering, well, are we double buying, by already having the online access and then adding more? And it really got to be it was a slow process, because there were some really favorite tools out there, favorite encyclopedias or things that we wanted, and so we kept buying the new one, but little by little it got smaller and smaller. So I think about what we had actually moved the reference collection from the far side of the library over there to this end. We had moved the periodicals had disappeared from this end, and we had them over here for a while. And at that point, we started thinking, there's not that many that we need. And it's such an odd thing to me now that, coming for a new librarian starting this job, you could not walk through the reference section in that same way. We do not have a reference section at all here. We have a lot of relatively current reference books intershelved in the rest of the collection, but not a really separate section, because we do use so many of the online sources.
So were the printed periodical indexes still here when you started?
No, they were not. We had a few examples of them. I know there was the effective use of libraries course. There was an EDT 251 course that was taught and is still taught at a slightly new iteration now. But there were examples of them around, and I had used them in previous libraries, but there were examples of them around that were presented to students in that class to kind of give them a sense of this is what indexes were like in paper and this is what they're like online. But it's really remained as more of a historical thing. I think I have a volume or two in my office now, you know. So same way.
Keeping track of circulation has certainly changed. They had like 3x5 cards that had a layer that you filled in and it printed onto the back, and then you had to go through the whole collection and decide who needed an overdue notice and whether it was the first notice or the
It's a
second.
multiple part form.
Right.
Right.
So it was nice when that became.
And there was supposed to be some technology involved with those cards. If you remember, they had holes along the sides, and you were supposed to be able to punch. You probably remember these, John. You were
Yeah.
supposed to be able to punch them, and then use what looked like a knitting needle. So you would punch them for the due date, and you would put the needle into the holes, and the ones that were overdue would fall off. And that's how you knew. But it really didn't
I do
work.
remember that.
It really didn't work very
That was
well.
our technology.
There's some
So we
technology,
would
that's
go
right.
through them, you know, card by card to pull out the ones that were overdue, because the needles thing just didn't. In theory, it was a good theory, but
And you no longer have to lay all those books out on that table to do your research paper. You no longer lay those books out. I remember had 3 or 4 different types of reference, or go back out, check the card catalog, that 3rd reference, that 4th reference. So you make your bibliography, lay that out there. And we'll always look for those books for how to write your bibliography the correct way.
Right.
You remember doing that? Yeah, and then I know we had copies of them too. I might still have 1 copy left. You guys would make a copy how to write bibliographies?
it was in our
And-
library handbook.
Yes. Yes, you're right, and I think I might, yes. And how to write it, and so I would use that when I was writing my papers, yes.
There it is. in our
That was it,
library
that was it, that was
Nothing like paper.
it. But technology, you go right online and all you have to do is type it in the template and it will perform it for you, so it's already done for you. We used to lay it out. Smell the book.
That's right.
Yeah, now you smell technology, right?
Yes.
One of the other functions that the library provided was fiction. They had a rental section where they rented fiction books. And a lot of us from the community, that was what we came to this library for, was they had a really good current fiction collection. That sometimes you couldn't find them at the public library, but you knew you could find them here. And I don't think they do that anymore, do they?
That was the McNaughton
Yeah,
collection.
not not as a rental, but yeah, Belinda managed that McNaughton collection in the town.
they had-
Until we
Yeah.
eliminated
Until we
it.
eliminated it, right?
They had a
We just
lot of-
started buying the books.
They had a lot of good music too, on cassettes.
And records.
No.
And records, yes.
Records too.
And records,
Those records.
yes.
The
Cassettes and
records used
records.
to be behind the
Yeah.
circulation desk.
LPs, vinyl. Yeah, vinyl. And they didn't circulate, you couldn't check them out. But the room at the end here,
You can
the
listen
front
to-
room was a listening room with the big headphones.
Big hit, yes.
And that was one of the things that was most attractive to the young men who came from Lebanon Correctional Institution. They would come in and get record albums and go back in the listening room and listen to music. Maybe when they were supposed to be in class, I don't know.
How many people now work at the library?
Oh, okay, good question. We have 5 full-time staff members.
Okay.
And I think right now we have 6 student assistants. Most of last year we had, what was for me a really large number, we had about, I think, 10 students all told. And that was actually something I was curious about, because most of the time I was here, it was like 3 to 5 students. We had a very small staff, and that's how it was kept at, more or less, or 4 to 5, you know. But I know in the past it was a much larger group.
I read in one of the annual reports at one time it was 11,
Mm.
that particular year, there were
Mm.
11 student assistants.
And I feel like I saw something in an earlier report, it was that there was as many as 20, like in the very earliest days, but I don't know.
Well, I-
Anything about that.
We had a full-time staff of 7 in 73, 3 librarians and 4 support staff. And of course, they were all women. And
We had one man
when,
come in.
when I left the public services librarian position to become what was then called the head librarian, I don't think that's your title anymore. The very revolutionary thing that happened was that the librarian who we hired to replace me as public services librarian was a man.
Mhm.
And that was in 1979. So the campus had been here
Quite a few
16,
years.
13
Oh,
years by
sure,
then,
sure.
and we finally had a man on the full-time library staff.
And then I wonder if he could fill her shoes, you know, that's my next question. You know,
Eddie?
I asked him, I said, do you think you can fill her shoes? And he's, oh, yes, I can. I said, okay, we're ready.
Could he bake?
No, but his wife could.
Oh, okay.
And he fit in very well. It's like he didn't lose the tradition, there's still stuff that was there.
I was thinking about the staff restroom being labeled as ladies.
Right, and the
Which
first
it
time,
was.
we went
Which it
in
was.
the restroom, it was, and I mean, that has echoes of the things that are, the conversations that are going on now, you know. I think we were probably sitting around the table for the coffee break, and he went in to use the restroom, and the other ladies looked at me like,
Yeah.
but you know, what were we gonna do? That's the staff restroom.
He fit right in, he was fine,
Aw.
he fit right in.
So I don't remember.
Another change that's taking place is they're finally putting in a real live, full-sized elevator in this building. Now, this campus has been here, this building was built in 60, what?
66.
65, 66, yeah.
And they didn't build it with a real live people elevator. And they're finally getting around to doing that. And that says something about how the world is. We wouldn't even think of building a 2-story building now without an elevator in it. Probably wouldn't even be legal to do that.
And trying to bring the furniture up and taking the furniture down, I think I remember some of the custodians or some of the guys that work here on campus just trying to lug the furniture up and lug them down, move things around. That was tough for them. They were not happy because there was no easy way of getting it upstairs or downstairs.
That's what I remember, we used a room that was the government documents room. We ended up using it as a study room. But it got to be the place where we would, you know, find
Catch
furniture for it. We
Catch
put
on.
whatever furniture we could down there, right? So I remember, you know, chairs we could put in the elevator, that was fine. But for the tables, we had these larger, you know, 6-foot, 7-foot tables. I remember rolling them around the building, looking like we were, I don't know, going to fight some medieval war somewhere. Very strange, the only way to get it there, right? So.
I know we tried to go modern when we got some furniture. We had a shaped furniture that looked like it was more of like a U or a W, and people would always fight to get over to those chairs because it was different. It was more modern to try those chairs out. And well, they weren't very comfortable after a while, but they came and sat in it. And they usually find the warm spot, or they would take a nap. They would take naps where the sun would hit them and fall asleep, and we just left them alone.
They had some nice couches out there also.
Oh, yes.
Very nice to sit in and to sleep.
Yeah, we find a few sleepy.
But I wasn't allowed to sleep because I was working.
Yeah. We all had to work, yeah.
Oh, yes.
One of the other big changes you see with the current modifications is the study rooms. You now have a half a dozen study rooms here. And there was nothing like that at the beginning. If you studied, you found a table way back in the corner where you wouldn't bother other people. And they didn't do group studying 30 years ago. It was individuals. It was your problem. It was not a group's problem. It talks about how the educational technology and techniques are changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big puzzle for us always was to modulate noise, figure out where it could be noisy and where it could be, it's like, it's a library, it's supposed to be quiet, but we need people to be able to talk. And I know, I remember when you were here too, we were always trying to figure out, like, well, there's that noisy group that meets in the back of the stacks. That's a problem because it's supposed to be quiet back there, but we were, really going to set it up as a quiet area. So what do we do? People are supposed to go downstairs and talk, or people are supposed to be in this section and talk. And it was always funny to try to figure out areas for people to go. And I think that's where starting by taking some of these side rooms, and as we, the IMC had moved into this room in its latter stages, and then when we decided to move that area out into the collection area, we were able to use this as a study room. And in a lot of ways, it had been used as there. It's one of those funny things, like where you watch the functions that are already going on in the room, and you start saying, like, we ought to really make that room do that thing. So like, so that there are a lot of times that nursing students would come in here and watch DVDs together, or would meet and study together. But then that was kind of a complication when someone needed to come in and get a DVD or get whether they didn't know if they should interrupt the people. In fact, I remember someone coming in when I interviewed. Actually, that was the interview room that was used for that purpose. But someone had to come in and get a video in the middle of it, which was fine with me. But it broke things up. I could get my breath back. but it was but that change really enabled us to turn this into a sit room, and likewise the lounge. And the lounge, that end room, you mentioned it being used for using the record player and all that. I was curious about the use of that room because at the time I was here, Joe Phillips would eat lunch in that room, and he invited me to eat lunch with him in that room. And we would often sit and eat lunch and chat a bit. But that's about the only use that was made of that room. so now it maybe was, I don't remember, did you use that room much when you were here?
I don't think we had a lounge. I think
I don't know if there was anything there,
I think that was where the records were, where we had.
The front room was the listening room, and there were at least 4 carrels with turntables in them. And they would check out their records and the headsets at the desk. And then they would listen to them in that front room.
And most of the lounge was back there in the back where you guys had coffee, and that was most of the time where you would eat your lunch or go out to eat lunch.
Right.
But I think your lounge area was just all behind the scene, behind the counter, behind that wall.
I remember coming back after I had stopped working here, and it must have been in the mid-90s. I was taking a class somewhere else, and 2 students that I was working with in a group, and we needed a place to meet, and so I remember asking Joe if we could use that front room, and we used it sort of as a group study room.
Sure.
So it was beginning to evolve into needing those kinds of facilities, even in the mid-90s.
One of the things that I've enjoyed about the library are meetings in the blue chair section, where people from the community come in and you never know what the topic is in the blue chairs. Could you explain what that is and maybe see if there's any history to the community coming in and using these for public talks or book clubs and things like that? So what are blue chairs?
Sure, definitely. Well, when we had our renovation in 2006, the renovation was fairly invisible. It was really replacing the heating and ventilation system. The ceiling came down. It was quite a shocking time in many ways. And we were outside of the library in a trailer. We had a trailer parked out in the little parking lot out there, and that's where we resided. But out of that outcome, the visible parts of the renovation were that we got these blue chairs. We had these nice kind of soft blue chairs with little desk arms on them, and we called them, the blue chairs. It got to be the real name for them because we kept adding more blue furniture that was similar. We used to call them laptop chairs too, because people would sit in them and put the laptop on a little desk. And we arranged them, the original ones, in kind of a round section. Now where the collection is sitting, I guess where the reference collection sat in the past. And we would hold, we have a monthly book discussion group that would meet there. We would sometimes find faculty members bring their classes over to sit in that area. And definitely holding other open events, bringing authors in or speakers in, and inviting the community more widely. So that was the blue chairs area there, and that's actually an area we're hoping to reform as we move the collection over into the renovated space. But yeah, I'd be curious to know about other ways in which the community has run it. I know about, the art exhibits. We were talking a little bit about the art exhibits and the art wall.
I can talk about the art
other
exhibits a
things
little
too,
bit.
yeah.
When I came in '73, it was before the Middletown Fine Art, what we know now as the Middletown Art Center, opened. It was the Arts in Middletown building where they finally had exhibit space, but the Middletown Fine Art Center did not have a permanent exhibit space. So they used the area now where the book collection is right now. That was a pretty big open area. And so we had a regular schedule of art exhibits from most of them from the Middletown Fine Arts Center. Sometimes they would bring in other kinds of exhibits, like I remember one was a traveling exhibit that the campus got that was Da Vinci models, sort of like the exhibit that you're seeing in Cincinnati now, on a much smaller scale. But on the Sunday evening at the beginning of an exhibit run, they would have a reception, and we would have student workers help with cleaning up the dishes and that sort of thing from this reception. And in many ways, this library was looked upon in the community before the public library downtown. The new public library was built, it opened in the 80s. But before that, this library was used a lot, I think, as kind of an East End public library by members of the community. The fundraising campaign to build the campus was still pretty fresh, so in people's minds. So there was a real feeling of ownership for the campus and an expectation that community members would have some privileges here. We issued cards to community members for the exorbitant fee of 25 cents. And they could borrow books, they could use the library, they could do pretty much, but we were not allowed to order books from Oxford for community borrowers. But we'd occasionally have people who would say, well, why don't you have cookbooks? Why don't you have a book about how to housebreak my dog? So then we had to have the conversation about the mission of an academic library versus the mission of a public library. But we had regular community borrowers who would come in to not only use the instructional materials center, but read the newspapers, use the periodical collection. I think the art exhibits, though, were probably the biggest visible community use.
Yeah, I got to hang a lot of those art exhibits when I worked here because I was involved with the art center and the fine arts center, and they brought some nice works in from local artists, and there was a wall just inside the front doors that was used to hang art on. And I believe there were panels over there where the
pegboards.
Book area is now. I get our area also had children's lit books. In that section, the education major is probably used for ideas for children's books to present in the classroom.
Make a way for ducklings.
They had pretty elaborate paintings and pretty elaborate stained glass. I remember one of the stained glass was huge.
Yes.
Remember how I didn't know how they were going to get it in, but they carried it up the steps. Yeah, and they put it right up there and held it up against the wall. It was huge. I remember that. It was huge. And you just come in, you were just overcome by all that art there. You come in like, wow, look at that. It was
One
very
of the
amazing.
pieces was must have been clay.
Yes.
And it was a torso, and it was hanging on one of those panels that John talked about. And it was there when we closed up the library at 10 o'clock at night. And the next morning we came in, and this clay torso was in pieces on the floor.
No.
And so we had to tell the artist, and of course it was covered by the Fine Arts Center insurance, but it was kind of a tragic thing. Have that piece of art it was there the night before, and it wasn't, and it had just fallen off the.
John, I remember we had a Smithsonian exhibit that toured through. Do you want to talk about the Smithsonian exhibit?
Oh, sure.
A couple years ago?
I can mention that, yeah. had been, I think, emboldened by talking to some other librarians, other regional campus librarians around the state about some things that they had undertaken, and one of which was there's a LTA program that the American Library Association offers on varying traveling exhibits every year, and we had applied for a grant to bring in an exhibit that looked at essentially the Emancipation Proclamation and then the March on Washington, and those two events, and all tied up within those events and between those events. And really, it was a great opportunity to bring in some materials that had been on display at the Smithsonian, have them here on campus, and have basically some panels of materials displayed, and then it also gave us some funding to bring in speakers and host some events related to the exhibit. So it was a very nice opportunity to bring that in, and something that I think we'd be open to doing again. We're something we're once we get again some space to work in. That was one of the things that does strike you when you're bringing in something like that, or when you're doing any kind of exhibit. Do we really have the room for this? Is this really something we can fit in here? And it did take some measuring and moving of this and that, and to make it to kind of fit it all in. But it was a lot of fun to do, a lot of fun to set up, and that was something that again some of our students worked on, and particularly Chris Mull, who was our circulation supervisor at that time, was a big part of establishing, getting that in place. So.
And you mentioned grant funding. You've done some things with grants, and we did some things with grants. So why don't you talk about what you've done with?
Oh, sure. Well, we did have a good run of luck with grants. I will say we had not done a lot with grants in the first few years I was here, and really I think maybe starting maybe 4 years ago or somewhere we started to look into some grants and go after some things. And so in addition to the exhibition, the travel exhibition that we were able to bring in, we did get grants for a couple of different book discussion programs. We also brought in, or were able to bring in funds to purchase iPads for a set of iPads for the campus, both for using in the classroom, which we have a set of 25 that we circulate in the classroom. We were also able to bring in another 20 or so to circulate to students for a day, and that was very, very useful, I think, both in terms of giving students technology to use that they could take home in addition to some of the laptops that we were checking out. But it's been particularly useful in a couple of different classes, particularly in our chemistry classes that have used the iPads the most to look at chemical models and to have students kind of do their own modeling with the iPads and memorize different chemical makeups of materials and all that. So it's been a really interesting program, but a lot of fun to be able to bring that together, see it come to fruition, and then actually get people to use the materials too, which we were very hopeful of as we went into it, and just to see how that continues to grow. The other fun part of the iPads is that they've actually gotten to travel quite a bit. The iPads, the classrooms, or a chunk of the classroom set, have been to Italy twice, and once to Hawaii, with some study abroad trips that faculty within the regional campuses took a couple of different trips to Italy for actually a chemistry related trip, chemistry of art, chemistry of food classes at Berenstein, and a criminal justice professor took them out to Hawaii and American Samoa and all that. So that was interesting. So you just never know. You never know where your equipment will go.
Well, I noticed back there in that one room you had 3D sculpting, where you got that. That's something that has just seemed to occur in the last couple of years. So are you going to elaborate more on that? Are you going to is there a class for that, or
that's an interesting question.
Or is that more of a club?
It's a little bit of, it's a little bit of everything. We're actually working now. This fall we have a faculty working community that the Center for Teaching and Learning on campus is sponsoring, for us to have faculty members explore some projects with the 3D printers and with some of the other equipment that we have back there, to see, well, how can making items or producing copies of items or whatnot help their students learn materials, or help them explore different areas of study. So that's where we're getting more formal with it. We have had a lot of both independent, just individuals who would come in and be interested in printing something or making something within our collections, within the collection of materials we have back there. We have done some projects with one of our geology professors, Tammy Gerke, who had us make multiple models of sets of fossils so that she had more fossils to show to the class, so everybody can be looking at the same fossil at the same time or in a small group, and then they would be better prepared as they went out into the field to look for similar fossils. So that was an interesting one, to be able to make copies of items and then print them out as 3D items. But we're just really interested in just exploring what that technology can do. And the way I think we've approached it is we hope it'll support classroom work and assignments, but we know it might just be interesting for people to get a chance to try out making things, try out inventing and innovating and exploring things on their own too. So it's a little fuzzy at this time, but I'm hoping to make it more concrete as we go. But we've definitely had a lot of people using the equipment, using the materials, and we're just hoping now in that new space to be able to really situate more there, have bigger groups come in and things like that. It's an area that we very much had to have in temporary spaces in the library. We used some of our temporary walls just to kind of carve off a little chunk of area that we could put things in. And now to have a full room for it, it's very exciting.
And to make it, instead of making it with clay and painting it, make it look like granite, make it look like sand, yeah.
There's one more part of the library that's been added in the last couple of years, and that's a center for our veterans. And I don't know if it's considered part of the library building, but I don't know if you want to talk about how some of the veterans are using that in the computer lab.
Oh, sure. Well, I can tell a little bit about it at least. It's definitely part of the building as a whole, and I think it's more a daily observed part for the computer center in many ways, because it is a room that is right off of the main computer center area. So that that they could even speak more to it than I could. But I think what's been very exciting on campus has been the establishment of, first of all, some variety of services to reach out to veterans and veteran students, and to have that really grow from first just kind of a recognition of, we have veteran students among us. There are certainly programs and services that they might be unaware of that they could utilize, and that likewise there are needs that they have that the faculty and staff here could know more about. We ought to have these interactions. We ought to have these discussions. And one thing that came about was the idea that student veterans would actually like to have a space to gather in, and that was really where the search for establishing an area that started that out. With the establishment of the area downstairs, it's an area that veterans can meet in. They can meet in just for study purposes, or to to talk as a group. There's a veterans organization on each of the campuses. And then what has been really tremendous is to bring together an individual within the regional campuses to coordinate a lot of Miami's veteran outreach and veteran services. And J.P. Smith has been just a really energetic individual to be the first person to serve in that role and to really bring that together. So we're glad to be in close contact with the veterans group down there. And one thing I've often talked about with JP is how can we serve the veterans in terms of research needs and other things. But it does put them in close proximity as they're studying to come up into the library as well. So.
And one of your students is on his way to another country, one of the student workers. Can you talk about the opportunity that student worker is getting without naming them?
Oh, certainly, yes.
Okay.
Definitely. So yeah, I was kind of good. I'm glad you checked me on that. So yeah, one of our student employees who just did some outstanding work for us on the library side. If you just knew him from the library side, you'd be, I was impressed enough. But to understand some of the work that he's been involved in over the years, both, and I will say he's been primarily a student, here at the Middletown campus, but as obviously as students do, taking many courses on the Oxford campus to complete his degree. And he's been working with primarily with bonobos, and had a lot of interaction with them, both in the Cincinnati Zoo, the Columbus Zoo, and really studying a lot of their psychology and a lot of their interactions. And out of the work that he did as a student and a lot of the research that he was working on in a variety of roles, both in class and out of class and in other accommodations, he won a tremendous opportunity to go and study in Europe, both in Switzerland and then also in Finland with a researcher. And he's doing that as kind of a bridge between his undergraduate degree and then starting a graduate program at Emory University. So it's just been, it was an exciting opportunity to get to know him. And then as you know, more of his research was going on, to do a small amount of support to him here in terms of finding articles and finding things for some of the research he was doing, but really just to get to interact with him and see the use that he was making of our resources and the great things that he was doing with it. So it was very exciting.
We're starting to approach our limit of time. Would you please summarize for me any observations of things that have continued and are just part of our nature here at the library? What continuities did you sense from tonight?
The continuity I really sensed is the sense of service to the teaching and learning here on campus. Yeah, we did it with print on paper, and they're doing it with all this wonderful technology, but there's still that commitment to enhancing the learning experience and supporting it.
That says it. I think that says it. Sure, the materials have changed. You don't have the LP record albums anymore. Everything is digital, and I didn't see a card catalog out there, so I'm sure all the few books that are remaining in the library are referenced online.
And John Burke speaks so highly of his student workers. 3 student workers that I worked with more than 40 years ago are here.
That's fantastic.
It's a very important job for people to start with,
And so crucial to our work. I think that's something that I've seen throughout the years here. We've had students who shine in various ways, but the thing that has been constant throughout is we would not get this done without them. We would not get this done without them. We try to make sure we're telling them that all the time, so they know how important this is. We need you here, to get this done. And
Also interesting, the number of former student workers who've gone on to get their master's degree in library science.
Definitely.
We have quite a few.
That is true. Yeah, you look at that list out there. There's a number of names. Right? So.
Even if the materials have changed or the technology or the forms of technology has changed, the people that are running the library are there to help the people, to guide them, to make sure they know. They come in that door, they might have no clue what to do, but then you're there to guide them, to help them answer questions. They might not have questions, but then sooner or later, if you show them the friendly face and the smile, the next day they might have a question. They'll come up to you, feel comfortable about asking, and you can lead them and guide them to the next place to go, what to do, how to help you. And it might just be to get a class. It might be to learn to do the technology, the computers. Maybe they're afraid of that computer, maybe you can help them. But it's the librarian and the students there that I remember, just because I filed the books away or materials away, I was still there to help those students that came in that door, needed to find a certain material or order a book or get a book from Oxford. That was our job, to make sure we guide them and help them and make their stay here at the library probably the best stay they've ever had, and they want to keep coming back, enjoying their time here.
I can remember the spring of 1971, finishing my freshman year, and I thought, it'd be interesting if I could maybe get a job here on campus, and I thought of the different things. And I thought, I like books, I like the library. I can remember coming in and asking, I think it was Virginia Brown, who approached me and said, "May I help you?" I said, "I would like to think about working here in the fall." And she said, "Well, take your name and the information." And in the fall of 1971, I was hired, and I have never, ever regretted it, ever.
I came back every summer.
Yeah, we worked in the summer too.
I came back in the summers and worked, and I worked as much as I could in taking classes. When I had classes at Oxford, I even drove back here. Because I didn't live on campus, I stayed at home. It was just easier on my parents. And so then I would drive back here, and then I would set it, so they were very kind and courteous, and make sure they worked around our schedules as much as you can, and how much time you could get into work, and before we all got, worked too many books, and they just said they would work around your schedule if you were a hard worker. And so I worked as much as I could in summertime, and so it was a good job. It was a good job.
They also helped us solve some problems.
Like what?
Like if you had a problem about, maybe with a friend or something. I remember I can always talk to Charlotte Noble.
Oh, yeah.
Charlotte Noble was down there and she had plenty of advice to give me. She was like a little second mother. But she was always a great lady.
Well, I'd like to thank you for taking us on this wonderful journey. It's been a pleasure to see the library through your eyes. If you have nothing else to contribute, do we have your permission to discontinue the recording?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.